Well, good morning, WellHouse Church. Pastor Cullen here. Excited to be back with you, storytelling through the book of Acts. I've been doing this Christian thing for a long time. I got baptized when I was 7, accepted my call to ministry when I was 15, and here I am almost 30 now. And through, 20 years of trying to do this thing we call being a Christian, I went through several iterations of what it means to represent Christ. Because that's what, if we're asking ourselves, like, what does it mean to be a Christian? It means that we are representing Christ and modeling our lives after the message of Christ. And the Gospel of John has a great example that if you want to know who God is, that you should look at who Jesus is. And so through that, I went through a lot of iterations of trying to answer that question. And I feel like I answer that question, or have answered that question very faithfully at each element of my life. But even being faithful in each of those moments, I think I better represent Christ today than I did when I was 7 or when I was 15 or when I was 21 or 25. And the reason I tell you that is because our story today, our text today, I think is asking us to answer that question. What does it mean to represent Christ? What does it mean to represent God as a Christian? But in order to answer that question, I have to tell you a little bit of background about the ancient world. There's a lot here, and so I would encourage you to join us for tomorrow's episode of A Closer Look to hit these more fully. But first and foremost, what you have to understand is in the ancient world, in the time of Paul, everyone viewed the world through one lens, an enchanted worldview. They didn't have science and objective truth that modernity gave us and all these things. What they had was an understanding that when things happen that they could not control, God, divinity of some kind, was controlling it. And so, when every person in the ancient world has that worldview, anytime something happens, they are quickly making up divinity or evil, righteousness or unrighteousness, justice or injustice. And so everything gets evaluated through divinity. And what that means is when you meet new people, there's very quickly a determination of divinity. Well, if you remember from last week, Paul is on a boat and he's headed to Rome for his trial. He's going to be before the emperor to solve this political, legal battle that he's been in for literal years. And they encounter a shipwreck. And they end up on the island of Malta. And another shameless plug for A Closer Look, Clayton, my brother and co-host on that podcast, has been to the island of Malta. And so we talk about it. When they arrive at the island of Malta, the text says that these people, the natives, showed them unusual kindness. Unusual kindness. Hospitality is very important in the ancient world. To care for a foreigner, a traveler, a person who might be scared and has no safety. That was important because everyone traveled and everyone felt the danger of traveling. And so hospitality was very important to the ancient world. And so they show this unusual hospitality, and they go on about doing some chores and doing some things, and they build a fire. And as they're building this fire, Paul goes to throw a piece of wood on the fire. And the text has this really strange way of communicating this. But verse 3 of chapter 28 in Acts says, Paul had gathered a bundle of brushwood and was putting it on the fire when a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. Vipers are extremely poisonous. This is not a good situation. So Paul picks up this bundle of sticks, and there's a snake in it. And he's going and starting to put it on the fire, and the snake figures out what's happening and latches on to Paul's hand, a viper. Most people die of this. Even today, a lot of people die from snake bites. The natives of the island of Malta immediately think he's going to die. Like, just immediately. Paul shakes the snake off of his hand into the fire, and nothing happens. They wait for it to swell up, nothing happens. They wait for him to get sick, nothing happens. This is what the text says. When Paul gets bit by a viper and nothing happens, the natives said, verse 4, when the natives saw that the creature hanging from his hand, they said to one another, this man must be a murderer. Though he has escaped from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live. See, everybody in the ancient world views things through divinity. That justice has to prevail. And so, yeah, he makes it through the shipwreck, but clearly this guy's a bad dude because he just died like this. They've already written him off. They've already made their judgments. They already know exactly who this guy is. So they think. They're expecting him to swell up or drop dead. But after they'd waited a long time and saw that nothing unusual had happened to him, they changed their minds and began to say that he was a god. There's a part of me that wants to read this story through the biblical story and say that it's pretty easy to see that someone conquering a snake is a divine element of conquering evil. Christianity is not the only religion that has snakes as an enemy or an antagonist to the story. But I'm not sure we should be reading it that way. What I think we should be reading it as is that this man has shown that he has power over death. Now, don't hear me wrong. I'm not saying that those other readings of evil and the snake are not valuable readings. I think I show you one of those tomorrow in a closer look. But what I am saying is that what the rest of the story shows me is that Paul is in a moment where the people of the island of Malta have a decision to make about the determination of the God that Paul worships. And what the people of Malta have been identified with is their unusual kindness. That the identity of these people is in their unusual kindness. Paul says, I have a moment here. I have shown victory over death and danger in this moment because of God. God has saved me from this. And so I have an opportunity to show these people who this God is, the one that I'm going to tell them that I was saved because of. And I got one shot. What am I going to do? Well, they're staying with this guy named Publius. And Publius has his dad is sick and about to die. So Paul heals him. Paul goes in and heals him. And then this is what the text says. After this happened, the rest of the people on the island who had diseases also came and were cured. WellHouse Church, what do I think it means to represent Christ? What do I think it means to be a Christian? I think it means to be a person of healing. Now, I don't think that's always going to look miraculous healing. I don't think, I'm going to be able to walk up to somebody with cancer and just pray over them it's automatically gone. I think God has the power to do that. I think in America we prevent God from doing that, but there are lots of great stories where God is supernaturally active in other countries. I think it means that we are a people of healing, that God is a God of healing. And so our duty as a Christian to represent Christ. What does it mean to represent Christ? I think Christ shows us that Christ is a healer. I think Paul shows us that being a type of person outside of Christ through the book of Acts, that Paul is a healer. And we are to be too. And so WellHouse Church, my question to you today is, how do we be people of